Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Averaging. Today we're going to be making a cinnamon roll coffee cake. Super easy to follow along. You will need some kind of stand mixer, hand mixer, spoon, whisk, but besides that, everything else should be super easy. So let's get started. So part one is going to be the cake, and then part two will be the topping, and then part three will be the glaze. So starting off with the cake, the recipe and the link that I'm gonna put below is going to be twice the size of what I'm making. You can always convert recipes, don't forget that. You can do it in half. I wouldn't recommend doing anything outside of half because that's when it starts to get questionable. So the recipe that I'm doing is going to be half of the link that I put. So if you're doing something bigger, please by all means follow the full recipe in the link. But otherwise, you can follow what I do. I'll convert everything for you, and you'll be good to go with about half of the recipe. Says 12 to 16, I believe it is. That's a lot more than I need. So we'll just be doing half of it. Okay. All right, so let's get started with the cake. We're gonna want to put the oven at 350 to preheat, and let's start getting everything together. And we will just be putting it all together in a bowl, so we don't need to worry about putting, salt first, flour first, all of that. We're just gonna be putting it all together to mix. Okay, the first thing that we're going to need is 1/4 cup of butter melted. Remember to use baking butter and not the kind of butter that you would use on bread, because that usually has some kind of oil already added, which makes it melt much faster. Next, you'll need 1 egg. Now we have 1/2 cup of sugar. Next is flour, and we'll have 1.5 cups of flour. I did use cake flour, which has a different conversion, but if you're using all-purpose flour, go ahead and just use 1.5 cup of flour. Next, we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay, next we have 1/8 teaspoon of salt. They don't make measuring cups that small, so just use your best judgment when you use the 1/4 teaspoon and make it in half, since we are cutting the recipe in half. All right, next is 3/4 cup of milk, and I used lactose-free milk. You can use whatever milk you want. I'm sure it doesn't make a difference if you're using like oat milk or almond milk or anything like that. Okay, and now we're just gonna put everything in the mixer. Like I said, if you have a hand mixer, a fork will work just as well. This is gonna be pretty easy to mix. So in goes the milk, sugar, flour, butter, all the butter, salt, baking powder, egg, and then last we're gonna do 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I didn't want to do it earlier because I was afraid I was going to spill. So 1 teaspoon of vanilla goes in also. And there we go. Now everything's ready to mix. So we should just mix it until consistency is pretty well put together of a cake batter. Okay, so when it usually comes to cakes, I like to go cupcake route. So putting them in their own little tins is better for me. However, you can use whatever cake pan you see fit. The recipe calls for a 9 by 13 pan. When it comes to cakes, you can really use whatever you have. Just be aware that if it's a bigger pan, the cake's gonna be thinner. And if it's a smaller pan, and the batter sits higher, it's gonna take a little bit longer to cook all the way through. So just a little bit of call outs to consider. I'm gonna go ahead and spoon in the batter into these guys, and then we're gonna set aside so that we can do the topping next. Okay, so this is the consistency
of the batter that it should be. We've all seen cake batter before, so just make sure that it's kind of this pourable consistency. Otherwise, something went wrong and you might want to retrack the steps to make sure that you're following along right.
Okay, so it did end up being perfect for these 12 cupcakes. So I do recommend doing it in these little cupcake holders if you have them. If not, that's totally okay. Use whatever you have, like I said earlier. Just make sure that you grease the pan that you're using. If you're using cupcakes, make sure to use these little papers. If you don't have them, spray pan, butter, whatever you have to grease the pan, grease the cupcakes so that it'll be easy to pull them out. So now we're gonna put this aside and start on the topping that goes on top.
All right, for the topping, we're gonna start out with half a cup of melted butter. All right, so next is half a cup of light brown sugar. You can use dark brown sugar. The recipe doesn't specify. I just know that most of the time they're referring to light brown sugar. All right, next is 1 tablespoon of flour. So I just went ahead and used the same cake flour that I was using before. And last part of the topping is going to be half a tablespoon of cinnamon. And since this is so small, we're just gonna go ahead and mix it all together into this blue bowl with just a fork.
Okay, so I underestimated my own ability to stir with the fork, so please grab a whisk. Because I was finding that it was hard to get the consistency correct. The consistency should be a little bit thicker. Let me see if I can get it kind of like that. You should be able to see kind of the cinnamon, brown sugar mixed in. It should be thicker. If you're seeing kind of a little bit more of liquid in spots, that means that the butter hasn't mixed all the way with the brown sugar and the cinnamon. So like I said, recommend a whisk. So sorry. That'll go much faster. It'll mix it much better, and it'll get the correct consistency. Okay, so now that we have the topping as well as the cake ready, we're going to spoon the topping on top of the cake. So obviously we're going to do these pretty individually since they're cupcakes. If you're doing it in one single pan, spread it evenly on the pan, just like you would any other cake, and that's it. It's ready to go into the oven. Okay, so this is what they ended up looking like. The topping should kind of just sit on top of the actual batter. Don't worry if it looks like the cupcakes or muffins, whatever, sit too high. No one's ever complained about having too big of a cupcake, okay? So these are ready to go in the oven for 30 to 35 minutes. I like to go the shorter end of the spectrum and then add more time if needed. So we're gonna go ahead and put these in the oven. Make sure when 30 minutes is over, you test with a toothpick or a fork. Try the ones in the center because those are gonna be the ones that take the longest to cook if need more time, okay? All right, so 30 minutes did the trick. They're pretty brown on top. They don't exactly have like that crumbly topping that I thought was going to happen, but they smell really good. So now we're gonna go ahead and do the glaze that's gonna go on top. So we start with 1 cup powdered sugar, and then we're going to add half a teaspoon of vanilla. Half a teaspoon of vanilla, and then 2.5 tablespoons of milk. All right, so that's 1, 2.5. Perfect. All right. So this is going to be the last of it. Okay, so let's add the glaze while they're still warm. And I'm just gonna pour it over top. We'll see how it goes at first, and if I need to add a spoon, we will add a spoon. All of it. So now let me get one out and I'm gonna go ahead and try it. So I'm gonna let it actually cool for a little bit. It's falling apart just a skosh, but hopefully once it cools out hot, that won't be the case.
It's supposed to be like a coffee cake. So, but it looks like the topping like fell to the bottom. So eat it upside down. Yeah, I'm doing it.
Okay.
So it looks like the topping fell to the bottom, but yeah, eat it upside down. See what it looks like. See what it tastes like.
Smells good.
It does smell good.
Really good.
Yay!
With a cup of coffee.
With a cup of coffee. Well, it is coffee cake. Okay. Thanks. Say bye.
Bye.
Well, there you go. It has my mom's seal of approval. It did look like the topping sunk to the bottom, so I recommend eating them upside down. If you did it in a cake pan, eat the piece of cake upside down also. I don't know. This was the first time I made them, and I recorded myself doing it, so I didn't get a trial and error kind of thing going as I have with like the pizza. But they're really good. Let me know how it goes, okay? Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, send me pictures of your cake, and here are all of mine. I can't wait to share these. There's no way I can eat them all. And you know, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you share it also. Yeah, thanks for tuning in.